Whoa there, Ted. What is all that?
Just getting into character, man.
What are you playing, a junk bard?
No, dude, nothing like that. My character comes from a long and proud line of jug band bards.
Oh, dang, cool idea. Let's talk about D&D NPC ideas, a Dwarven Jug band of bards. Welcome to Nerdarchy, for nerds, by nerds. I'm Nerdarchist Dave, and as usual, I'm joined by this nerd.
Nerdarchist Ted.
Don't let those D&D videos dance by your YouTube feed by stopping them in their tracks by hitting that subscribe button.
And if there's more Nerdarchy videos you're after, you're going to have to let the music of that notification bell ring out.
So, before we jump into this video, down below in the description, you're going to be able to find some character sheets for these NPCs that we create. We're going to be using D&D Beyond, the sponsor of this video. It makes creating these character builds and characters for our games, encounters, looking up all things D&D so much easier.
D&D Beyond is a great resource, and if all those things that Dave says aren't enough, you've got the ability to look at all the videos, all of the articles, as well as the encounter builders, as well as the rolling the dice right there on the character sheet on D&D Beyond. It's a fantastic resource. There's no reason not to check out D&D Beyond.
With that, let's jump into it. We're going to be talking about NPC ideas for your D&D game.
All right, so Dave, I believe you brought this idea to the table. So where did this whole thing come about? Where did these guys come from?
All right, so these are actually NPCs I recently introduced into what I affectionately dub the family game, because I play it with my son, my wife, and my nephew, and one of my son's friends. And they recently went to a new city, a new tavern, and just some set pieces I threw out there. And one of the things that was a Dwarven Jug band up on stage performing. So of course there's also a bard in our group, so you know where that's going.
They're like, oh, well, how do I play that instrument? How do you guys do this? How do you do that? Can I join in? There's so many fun things that the bard is gonna latch onto in that kind of situation.
Yeah, so the players were going about their business and kind of like soaking in the ambience of the tavern, and then of course the bard is like, hey, I want to go up there and talk to the performers, and they kind of challenged these dwarves to a bard off.
Wow, that those kind of things are gonna happen, because bards, can be played in a very competitive-esque style. But that was not where my brain was going with this. So like, what was it about these guys that made the bard decide to go down this direction? What was so attention grabbing about them?
Well, so I kind of describe these guys as being the jug band, right? So they're using weird instruments. They're dwarves, and they're kind of dressed like hillbillies a little bit. So the bard and the monk goes up there, and they want to challenge them, and the monk wants to get involved. The monk is a turtle, and they decide that not only do they need to challenge this band of bards to a battle of the band, but no, they have to use the turtle shell as the instrument for the bard. Of
course. Yeah, I mean, that makes total sense.
Yeah, so I required a performance check from our monk, his charisma is not their best stat, and they are not trained to perform. But they actually rolled really high on it anyway. So I incorporated them kind of just going into their shell onto the stage into position as part of the act. And then the bard, is trained and did a really good job and rolled well. So they totally, kind of destroyed them. And, the dwarves gave them props for doing such a great job. And they started kind of bonding over music a little bit. And, so I was inspired for these dwarves too, because I decided to make them brothers a little bit from the Bob Newhart show from back in the day.
Yeah, if you happen to be, kind of getting along like us, I was not going to quite go there. But, I mean, that show was on its way out when I was a kid. So like not a whole lot of people, know Larry, Daryl, and Daryl.
Yeah, so the band's name is the Firebricks, the Dwarven Jug band, and it's like the house band at the Frozen Forge Tavern, which is in our Frosthaven City, which is kind of like this place in the middle of nowheres, but we always kind of describe it of a slightly eviler Las Vegas, for reasons. But, this video actually centers around those NPCs, the three brothers. Right. We have Jigs, Jugs, and Rigs are the name of them. And, so one of them plays a washboard. One of them plays an actual jug or multiple jugs. And the other, kind of the leader of the lot, is the spoonist.
Oh, nice. So, like, when you start getting into, these homemade instruments, it can be a lot of fun, and it can very much encourage players to be like, oh, well, what do I have on my person that I could make an instrument out of? And they begin playing with their inventory, and it can really encourage, the players at the table who might have a little bit of, imagination or, the desire to interact on another level, and it can really take the game from a very serious, combat heavy oriented process into this cool role playing moment that could be talked about for a long time.
Yeah, so so a little bit of the backstory is as the players delve into it, they'll find out that these three brothers are actually fugitives. They're criminals. They fled the civilized lands to the edge of the world, essentially, and they're trying to make a living. And maybe they've turned over a new leaf, and they don't want any more parts of that life, but they still have to deal with the repercussions. So they've kind of fled as far as they can from civilization. And we have Jigs, who is a fighter and a champion, and he has makeshift armor, right? But built into his breastplate is the washboard that he plays, so he can play it right there on his chest.
So does he have the typical caps on his fingers, or does he just totally have the gauntlets? That's part of it, and do the wrapping or the scratching.
Oh well, he could probably just use the gauntlets straight up.
Nice.
And I think for Jigs, I think we're going to give him the entertainer background, because as a dwarf and as a fighter, we don't have any other way to give him proficiency in his washboard.
That is true. But, we also, can always look at, just because the NPC, is a part of something, they don't necessarily have to have the skill. They might just have the charisma or, some other way that they've just managed to always get by.
Yeah,
go on.
Like you're saying, as an NPC, you can always just be like, oh, he can just do the thing, right? You don't necessarily have to stat it out. But in this case, we are going to, so we can show you the character sheets. Jugs is not actually a bard at all either. Jugs is a monk, and he is a drunken master. Jugs is our juggist, and he earns his jugs the honest way. That's right. He drinks them dry. He's not reusing the same jugs over and over again. He's going to drink them and then use them.
drink and pass. And once it's empty, all right, I'm going to use that one today.
Now, Jugs has the pirate background. So at some point, there were boats involved.
Which, dwarves and boats, aren't always, the best of friends, but, maybe that's why he took up drinking. But, the drunken master does get an instrument through, the course of getting access to that subclass. So totally fits for him.
And also, too, I'm playing him I would play him less as a monk and more as a brawler. Okay. That just happens to be drunk all the time. Yeah. Finally, that'll bring us to Riggs, and this is kind of the leader of the group, the eldest brother. And Riggs is an honest-to-God bard. We're going to go blade, and he sharpens his spoons. So instead of using little spoons, he's using big spoons, right? Like serving spoons. That's what he plays with. And he's sharpened the edges, and he will use those to fight with. So, maybe we'll have to take some tavern brawler with this guy at some point. Maybe not. He just makes it work.
it could function under improvised weapons, or maybe they're just, slightly altered daggers. Maybe it's a D4 weapon, or maybe you want to go totally off the cuff and make it like a D3 slashing weapon. It'd be amusing, but I totally see this guy click clacking away on the spoons, and careful not to cut himself with them.
Absolutely. And Riggs has the criminal background with the specialty of smuggler. We figure, the three of them, probably were on a pirate ship or a smuggler ship, and that is how they made their living. Also, where they got into trouble. I also feel like Jiggs just kind of got drug into this stuff and followed his brothers around, and now he's kind of grumbly about having, being a fugitive with them because he's just listened to his brothers, and all they ever do is get him in trouble.
So with these three, I don't know how true to the characters from the Newhart show you're talking about. I always perceive them as very, very low intelligence, very low wisdom. Is that kind of a direction you went with these guys?
Maybe not quite to that extreme. They're a little backwater for sure. But they're there for comedic relief. They were there to kind of help the players find their way around town. Because after they're defeated, they were kind of really good natured about it, and they're kind of like began bonding with the players, and the players had a list of things they wanted to do, and they needed to figure out where in town to go. They'd been around for a while, so they were kind of more than happy to help them out after they put on such a great performance.
That's really cool. So, from here, you could obviously take any of these three character sheets and, I'm going to drop them in a game as, I'm going to play one of them, and you could be like, hey, something happened to my brothers, I'm on the look for them, and that could be your backstory of how you got involved in the party, and you've got ready-made character sheets, right here. Could totally drop these guys into, whatever city, because they could easily be on the run from whatever it is that, they've done in the past. Or, they could absolutely be, story hooks of, if you've got players who are maybe on the slightly shadier end of things, or maybe need to get in touch with the shadier end of things. And this could be, your gateway into that world, is dealing with these characters that have a nice cover of being able to go anywhere under the guise of entertainment, but still have these connections on both sides.
Or maybe you need a smuggler, right? You need to smuggle something, and they may be retired from smuggling, but they still know how to get it done. And like Ted said, maybe they have the connections, so you could probably introduce them that way, and they may show up in my game that way in the future. Who knows? But if you like the idea of using a tavern as the backdrop, like we did for these NPCs, we have another video where you can just skip the tavern altogether with 10 ways to not start in a tavern Game Master tips.
But just YouTube is not the only place that we're creating stuff. Over on Patreon, we're creating products for 5th edition D&D for players and GMs alike every month.
But that's not all. We do weekly hangouts with our patrons, monthly giveaways that our patrons are automatically entered into, and more.
So until next time, stay nerdy.